Little Rhonda needs to fix. Proof is in the pudding, and I put 3 fingers in it.
Today, I sat down here in Columbia, South Carolina with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis for this exclusive interview. This was just minutes after he had unveiled a sweeping new military policy. DeSantis said in that announcement speech that his proposals are intended to, quote, rip the woke out of the U.S. military.
It's a military that has been ordered by civilian officials to pursue political ideology, to pursue social experimentation, to be yet another institution in American life that gets infected with the woke mind virus.
So the DeSantis plan includes ending all groups and positions in the Pentagon that focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, banning transgender service members from serving as they identify, ending funding for what DeSantis calls, quote, activist climate change programs, unquote. DeSantis also wants to reinstate all service members who were removed for refusing the COVID vaccine, and he wants to punish any retired generals and admirals who speak out harshly against the sitting president or Congress or other officials. DeSantis says the things he wants to eliminate are harming the readiness of the U.S. military.
This is changing the character of the military, it's changing the culture of our services, and it's creating a situation in which great warriors have been driven away and recruiting is at an all-time low post-abolition of the draft and the Vietnam conflict.
It is true that recruitment is at a low, but we should note Pentagon officials repeatedly reject almost all of those accusations. And that's where Governor DeSantis and I started our discussion today.
Well, get to the good
Let's talk
stuff.
about this sweeping new military policy you proposed that, in your words, will rip the woke out of the military. The Pentagon response is that Army and Marines readiness is the best it's been in years, and reenlistment in the Army is the best it's been in years. So their argument might be, in response, what problem are you trying to solve?
Well, why do we have the worst recruiting that we've had since the Vietnam conflict? Why have great warriors being driven off, such as with the COVID-19 shot mandates? These were people that had been performing admirably. A lot of them had COVID. They had natural immunity. They were told, take this shot or leave. So I think you've had a big problem
You're a fucking idiot.
With morale. You
You're
clearly
a fucking
have
dumbass.
a problem with recruiting.
The military does so much worse than just vaccines.
These recruiting levels
With respect to vaccines, they literally do it one day at a time.
Why is that the case? I think it's because people see the military
do all the
losing its
vaccines.
way.
It's a part of military readiness.
Focusing on the mission and focusing on a lot of these other things, which, man, we see that in other aspects of society as well. People want to join the military, I think, because they think it's something different, and I think some of the civilian leaders in the military are trying to have the military mimic corporate America academia. That's ultimately not going to work.
So I hear you. Recruitment, without question, is a problem. The Army did this survey. I'll give you a copy of it if you want. They haven't released it, but I got my hands on a copy. And it surveyed people, I think 16 to 28 barriers to service, and beyond the ones such as don't want to die, don't want to be injured, don't want to be away from my family. The biggest issues were the number 2 issue, women and racial or ethnic minorities are discriminated against in the Army. Wokeness is listed here, but it's only number 9. So that would suggest that wokeness is not as big.
Well, but I think there's an issue about, like, not everyone really knows what wokeness is. I mean, I've defined it, but a lot of people who rail against wokeness can't even define it. And so I think it's a sense of, this is not something that's holding true to the core martial values that make the military unique. And I can tell you, the veterans, you don't have to look far and wide. Go to a VFW hall, go to an American Legion. There's huge amount of concern about the direction that the military is going with all this. And here's the thing, things like DEI and all that stuff, it hasn't worked in other aspects of society. It very well may be on the constitutional chopping block in light of the Supreme Court's decision on racial discrimination in higher education. And so it's not a model that I think is going to be successful in the military. And so we're going to do what has been successful in the past, and I think you're going to see better recruiting as a result.
So the Pentagon says that they do try to achieve diversity in recruiting, but not when it comes to promotions, that's all merit-based.
Well, I mean, I think that we have seen standards watered down in different situations. I think that that's probably not accurate. Obviously, they're going to say they're doing a good job. I mean, we get that. That's going to be their thing, but I don't think that that's in tune with reality.
So let's turn to foreign policy, because obviously that goes hand in hand with military policy in many ways. As a congressman in 2015, you strongly backed arming Ukraine after Russia invaded and seized Crimea. As a presidential candidate, you've said that the conflict is not a vital national interest. So as president, what will your policy be? Will you want to stop arming Ukraine? Will you stop financial support for Ukraine?
So first, a vital national interest to me means we would potentially send troops there. And I don't think anybody wants to see troops in Ukraine, and I would believe that in 2015 as well. It's more of a secondary or tertiary interest. So my policy is going to be very simple. Our number one threat to our country is from China in terms of foreign threat. We also have a threat of being able to not secure our own border. Tens of thousands of people are dying every year because the cartels are running fentanyl. So you got to be strong at home if you want to be strong abroad. We are going to approach the world instead of Europe being the focus like it has been since World War II, and it was understandable why it would be after World War II. NATO, stopping the Soviets, I get it. But now the Asia-Pacific really needs to be, to our generation, what Europe was to the post-World War II generation. And so what we're doing is how much hard power can we marshal as much as possible to deter China. I think we're in a situation now with how weak we've been that we are going towards maybe having a conflict with China. I think the way to deter that conflict with China is to be strong. So I would have the Europeans do more in Europe. That's more in their backyard. That's more of an interest for them. You know, I would be willing to be helpful to try to bring it to a conclusion there, but I am not going to diminish our stocks and not send to Taiwan. I'm not going to make us less capable to respond to exigencies. And you got to care at least as much about your own border as you do about foreign borders.
So when you talk about trying to bring an end to the conflict, would you push Zelensky to make concessions to Russia to cede land that Russia seized in its attack?
So what I would say is what the goal should be a sustainable, enduring peace in Europe, but that one that does not reward aggression. And there's going to be different levers that you're going to be able to pull. We will pull some levers against Russia. We're going to be much more aggressive on energy and export, because I think that's been Putin's lifeline. I want the Europeans dependent on the United States for that, not him. We're also going to turn the screws on the Iranians. The Iranians have been one of Putin's biggest benefactors, and they've benefited from Biden's approach there. So we'll use the leverage that we have, but the goal is going to be a sustainable peace that does not reward aggression.
What do you say to the argument that Xi Jinping is watching the U.S. response to Ukraine to game out how the U.S. would respond if China invaded Taiwan? President Biden has said that U.S. forces would defend Taiwan if China invaded. Would you do the same? Would you order the U.S. military to defend Taiwan?
Well, two things. So first, how does China view this? I mean, it's somewhat speculative. I think what they would like to see in Russia-Ukraine is a multi-year stalemate and quagmire where the West is pouring in $100 billion, another $200 billion of weapons. Our stocks continue to decline. They don't really care about the Russians. Russia will be more dependent on China as a result of that. So I think that's what Xi would like to see ideally. Now, in terms of Taiwan, that is a significant interest of the United States. Taiwan is a strong ally. Taiwan is important for us economically and for a variety of other reasons. Also, a potential Chinese attack on Taiwan successfully would have big reverberations in the Asia Pacific. But our policy is going to be very simple. We're going to deter that from happening. China respects hard power. If you have hard power, if you have strong alliances with the Japanese, I visited there a few months ago. The Koreans and the Japanese are getting along now. They never used to get along because they both see the threat posed by China. So we're going to work together. We're going to be much stronger. We're going to project power, and we're going to deter that from happening.
America's the great unifier,
Let's talk about some issues here in the United States. You've been asked by a number of members of conservative media, and you have yet to give a yes or no answer. You recently signed a 6-week abortion ban in Florida. Yes or no, would you support that as a nationwide ban?
So I said I'm pro-life. I will be a pro-life president, and we will support pro-life policies. At the same time, I look at what's going on in the Congress, and I don't see them making very much headway. I think the danger from Congress is if we lose the election, they're going to try to nationalize abortion up until the moment of birth. And in some liberal states, you actually have post-birth abortions. And I think that that's wrong. Also, with respect to the military thing that we talked about, we're going to reverse the abortion tourism policy.
Guys, I'm sorry. This is the most normal Republican, right? This is the most like appealing non-fascist Republican they could trot out. This doesn't even hit the civility politics metrics.
To do funerals, and so we're going to
just
continue
unhinged.
To stand for life, and we're going to make sure that everybody knows that.
So I asked the DeSantis campaign what exactly the governor was referring to when he referred to post-birth abortion. They said it was a reference to when an infant survives an abortion procedure and life-saving medical care is not provided. Much more of my interview with Governor DeSantis coming, including my asking
What do you
him what he
mean?
makes of the
And what did you
perception
respond?
from
Did you push back to
politicals
it? Bro, he
in the
sucked his
2024
cock
race. We have
harder
more
than Fox
from
News
Columbia, South
does.
Carolina next.
What is going on? Why is he fucking glazing him harder than...
turn into scientists.
Why is he glazing him harder than Fox News does in certain instances? We know little Rhonda doesn't conduct any interviews on television that don't glaze him, right? He only does interviews if the interviewer is glazing him. It's wild to me that Jake Tapper was like, I know you haven't even gone on some of the Fox News shows due to how bad you are at responding to any kind of pushback. So we'll give you no pushback whatsoever. We'll give you an easy peasy ass interview, which is weird because it's significantly more clippable if they do shit on him. Because if they shit on him, then Fox News and all the right wing can go, oh my God, they're terrified of Ron DeSantis. That's why they're fucking attacking him. This positive ass interview works in Trump's favor. Trump could say, look at the Clinton News Network. They don't want me, folks. They're so scared of me that they're not even asking Rhonda any questions that might be considered hard hitting. Please lose the hat. You're no veteran. Excuse me, brother. I'll have you fucking know that I served this goddamn country in the Korea War. And you will not get me to take my Korean War hat off. I didn't steal this goddamn valor. I earned it. That's right, the Democratic People's Republic. You have your strongest soldier, you have your bravest soldier right here. Now you best recognize and thank me for my motherfucking service. Right now. I mean, I've done ironically, between me and Ron DeSantis, we've done like a similar amount of service. He was like a JAG lawyer for the Navy, right? I did not serve in the military, but pretty much the same. It was a jag-off. Wait, this motherfucker really thinks I served. That's pretty funny. He said, did you really? There's no shot this guy, I mean, that's crazy. He's memeing, right? Yeah, I did, bro. I did. I served for the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. I already told you I did. Why don't you believe me? What do you mean? I'm actually the youngest looking 85-year-old you've ever seen in your entire life. It's because I have the walking treadmill. Your fits are going to have to adapt to this new, more active streamer lifestyle. All button downs and sweat are not a good mix. Yeah, that's why I have fucking the undershirt. Like if it gets hot, which it isn't right now, but if it gets hot, I can just do this. Bam! Blammo. We're back. All of a sudden, click the top down, and then we're cooking. We're cooking with gasoline. Here we go. Left and right. Left and right. Left and right. Guy fucking questioning my authority. At least you lost the hat? No, I didn't. I just took it off for a moment. I'll never take this hat off. My truth. I was a veteran.
Live from Columbia, South Carolina, the second half of my sit-down with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis started with the second half of his campaign, as he has, as of yet, failed to catch up to the leading candidate, former President Donald Trump. So What is the DeSantis strategy to make up lost ground? That's what I asked him right after we discussed his support for a 6-week abortion ban. So this issue gets into the state of the race because some of your supporters are disappointed that your campaign has yet to catch fire the way they would want in terms of polling. One Republican pollster, one who is sympathetic to you, I was asking her about your campaign, and she said she thought the issue was you bumped up at the beginning because voters, Republican voters, saw you as a more electable conservative like Trump, Trump without the baggage. But then they say as you go further and further to the right on some of these divisive social issues that could alienate moderates, suburban moms, et cetera, Republican voters see you as less and less electable. What do you say to that analysis?
Well, I don't think it's true. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. I mean, I took a state that had been a 1-point state, and we won it by 20 percentage points, 1.5 million votes. Our bread and butter were people like suburban moms. We're leading a big movement for parents' rights, to have the parents be involved in education, school choice, get the indoctrination out of schools. Of course, there's bread and butter issues that matter too. Inflation, more economic opportunity. Florida's
Proof is
economy
in the
ranked number
pudding.
1 of all 50 states.
And I
We
put
worked
3
hard,
fingers
to
in
make
it.
that happen. Crime, you see crime in all these different communities that is now even going into suburbs and some areas.
hungry.
So I think that there's a lot of things. I don't think that's the reason. I think the reason is I was getting a lot of media attention at the time, coming off the victory. I had to do my job as governor with my legislative session, and we had a great legislative session. We did a lot of great things, actually things that appeal to huge majorities of the population. So I think that analysis is wrong. But I had to do that, and so I was basically taking fire really nonstop since then because a lot of people view me as a threat. I think the left views me as a threat because they think I'll beat Biden and actually deliver on all this stuff. And then, of course, people that have their allegiances within the Republican side, have gone after me. But the reality is this is a state-by-state process. I'm not running a campaign to try to juice, whatever we are in the national polls. I mean, whatever we did in the CNN compared, whatever, it's fine. I'm definitely doing better than everybody else.
But it's state by state, obviously.
It's state by state.
Right.
So we're focused on building an organization. You got to get people to come out in the middle of January in Iowa to caucus for you. That requires an organization, requires to know where those votes are. Now, that is not
The only
gonna
people
make
pulling
the same
for him is
type
the
of
GOP donor
splash,
class.
as if you were trying to run ads nationally or do those other things. And so we've been making really good progress. I think this weekend was really good in terms of the family leader and some of the other things we were doing in Iowa. Of course, we're here in South Carolina. We're going to do a lot in New Hampshire. But that's going to be our focus, focusing on those early states, continuing to build our coalitions and going forward. And I would also just note, Jake, there is a narrative that they're almost trying a little too hard with this to try to say, because they've been saying that I've been doing poorly for my whole time as
Little Rhonda's issue is comparable to Governor Gruesome Gavin Newsom's issue. Little Rhonda needs to fix the home insurance crisis happening in his state. Governor Gruesome Gavin Newsom needs to fix the homelessness issue in his state. Without fixing those things, people, even in your own state, will not vote for you to be
But
president.
I kind of get a kick out when they say he didn't fundraise well when I did more than Biden and Trump in the second quarter, and I'm just the governor.
So I didn't believe that poll was accurate, just for the record. Your new policy that you announced today about the military would ban transgender Americans from serving in the military, regardless of their ability. And this comes on the heels of your campaign retweeting a video that the Log Cabin Republicans, which is a conservative LGBTQ group, said, quote, ventured into homophobic territory, unquote. There are more than 1 million trans adults in the U.S. What are their
He's just
lives and the
glazing
lives
him.
of the people who love and support them going to be like under a DeSantis administration?
Well, look, in the military, it's all about the mission first. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why you focus on mission first. People's individuality, it does take, you do have to check that at the door. And that's not the only example. There's a whole host of other examples.
Which is
so I
why
think the military
transphobia
culture is unique
should
in
not
terms of that.
exist.
Now, in terms of the larger issue, the question is, what role does someone that's a man have in women's activities, even if they conceive of themselves to be a woman? I think it's wrong to have men compete in women's sports. And I understand some of those men conceive of themselves differently, but it's not fair to the girls who are competing. It's not fair to the women athletes. The swimmers who lost that national championship to the Penn swimmer, I mean, they've been training too. So I don't think it's good for that. And I think having things like locker rooms where they're having to share with somebody who's of the opposite sex, I think is wrong. So I would respect everybody, but what I wouldn't do is turn society upside down to be able to accommodate, which is a very, very small percentage of.
It's so gross seeing them triangulate to like a much more moderate position when they're talking, when you know their policy positions are fucking psychotic.
National security.
I hate it. I hate it more than the Matt Walsh types who are just like openly fucking insane and you recognize it immediately as soon as you hear them.
That climate change.
Why is there no pushback, Jake, you fucking idiot?
Because of refugees, because of conflicts,
what the
because
fuck?
of all sorts of reasons. What's your response to that? The idea that climate politics isn't about politics, it's about national security.
Well, here's the thing. How are you going to equip your fighting force to win? Are you going to put those considerations in? Or are you going to create the most lethal force available? I can tell you, China is not going to use those considerations. If they need to burn more coal to defend their country, they are going to burn more coal to defend their country. So I just don't think it should be a factor in terms of how we project power in this country. Focus on how lethal we can be and focus on getting the mission done. I don't want to force the Department of Defense to be using electric vehicles. I just don't think that that's something that makes any sense.
You entered your candidacy officially for the Republican contest here in South Carolina. Before you go, are you going to win South Carolina?
Yeah, we are. I think this is a great setup for me. I'm the only veteran running. I'll be the first president elected since 1988 that served in a war. There's very few states in this country with a stronger active duty military presence and veteran presence than here. We've also got great support in the upcountry in South Carolina that we're building. And of course, my wife went to college at Charleston, so we know the low country well, and I think we're going to be able to build a lot of support here. So this is a great state for us, and the way the calendar's working out, you're going to have New Hampshire in late July or January, and then here in late February. So we're going to be spending a lot of time. You're going to be spending a lot of time in South Carolina.
All right, Governor DeSantis, thanks so much for your time today.
Appreciate you.
So only about 15
insane.
minutes, but we covered a lot of ground. Let's talk about all of this with our political panel. Scott Jennings, former advisor to George W. Bush.
Actually insane.
This is a rare sojourn by Governor DeSantis.
Now we have Bush people. Now we have institutional Republicans to come talk about how good of a job I did not fucking attacking our guy.
Well, all the things you talked about today, whether it's transgender policy or, the things he has to say about the culture of the military or
That's awesome.
Even sort of
That's
talking
awesome.
about the nature of the county. I mean, all these things are pleasure centers for Republican voters. And, that's what he's trying to get done today. He may not think that tons of Republicans are going to watch it live, but obviously getting those things into the ecosystem that they live in, which is internet, Twitter, getting that out to their people. I think he hit a lot of topics that they think are going to work. And it's obviously his brand. This anti-woke stuff, it's his brand. And I don't get the feeling he's going to come off of it just because he's talking to a non-conservative media.
So Kristen Soltis.
Yeah, except he is talking to a conservative media figure. Jake Tapper is absolutely conservative. That's why he didn't offer any fucking pushback to his anti-trans screeds on the conversation. Not even just anti-trans, but like homophobic as well. I mean, come on, dude.
He was seen by...
The irony is that if he had a more contentious interview with Ron DeSantis, it would have been better. It would have played better to a conservative audience. Never trust the fucking former George W. Bush guy who's like now writing for DeSantis. Those guys are all fucking losers. They're idiots. The reality is, if little Rhonda went on CNN and actually fought hard and actually got pushback and did a good job owning them, making them look like clowns in the same way that Donald Trump has done time and time again, that would have boosted his numbers. This is just a positive interview that he did with Jake motherfucking Tapper. Republicans want more aggressiveness. They want more like battles to fight. They want libs to own. Okay?
Him too is that if you
Donald Trump can say Jake Tapper hated me for 4 years, 5 years, 6 years now, 8 years almost. Look at the way he treated Ron DeSantis. How are you going to tell me that these guys, all Republicans, Democrats alike, don't want Ron DeSantis instead of me? How can you tell me that? That's what I would say if I was Donald Trump.
that doesn't necessarily get you the nomination.
Well, it would work if Republicans had ranked choice voting. But
not the world we live in.
So maybe in Iowa. Bakari, what did you think? His argument very strongly that he is the candidate that the left fears the most, that they would rather have Donald Trump take on Biden because Biden can beat Trump and Biden cannot beat him. That's how he views it.
No, I still think that is a decently ludicrous argument. I think that most Democrats fear, and this is probably going to be in an email blast soon, but most Democrats still fear Donald Trump. Donald Trump got 74 million votes, I believe, last time. There's no belief that Republicans and the silent majority or the silent canceled or whatever they may be will leave Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the candidate that puts the most fear, even with baggage, in the hearts of Democrats. I think what we showed today was that I was happy to see him sit down with, I forget what they call you now, corporate media.
Corporate media.
Yeah.
I'll take that's the nice version.
That's
the nice version.
Trust me, I know. But I was glad to see him sit down outside of his bubble, because then it helps him look more electable. I mean, it's one thing to do a Joe Rogan interview or kind of the fringes. It's another thing to sit down with a consummate journalist. And I think today he was able to handle those questions and deal with them. And although I don't believe in his policies per se, but he actually looked decently presidential today. Yeah. I'm not sure it was a reset, because everything is, I'm anti-woke. Today he just inserted in the military, but at least today he started to give the vibe.
He did a good job of coming across as moderate to the CNN audience too. So that's like not a good thing. That's what they're doing.
There was one thing I thought was interesting though on this question of wokeness, is that he actually acknowledged to you that a lot of people don't even know what wokeness means.
A lot of people who rail against it don't know what it means.
But it's a feeling. It's a vibe, and it's like you know it when you see it. Yeah. And I think that's what he's getting at, because Republicans believe under Biden, a softness has crept into the military, and that most major institutions have been invaded by something. He calls it woke, but they know it's something that they don't recognize as traditional American values. That's the broad definition of it. Even if you can't specifically define the word, you know it when you see it, and that's what he's speaking.
Let Kristen finish.
Well, yeah, but and to that point, though, the phrase wokeness, I thought it represented a good bit of sort of self-awareness, that he goes, this is a term that if you're on the right, you definitely know what it means.
Yeah.
But I know I need to broaden my audience. Now, a couple sentences later, he used the acronym DEI, which again is something that conservatives know exactly what DEI is.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Right, but for your sort of median voter, I don't know that that's like tip of their tongue. So there may still be some work to be done there to figure out how can you take his message more broadly from like conservative talk radio, that type of world, to a broader audience. But at least that showed some self-awareness.
But the voters and the Republicans.
But this is why I appreciate this discussion, because my friends who are sitting to my left, but who actually to the right of me, and not most, but everything, it's a troublesome word for them to define. But it also woke, and it's and even in his description today, it's the furthest thing from what it is, but I dare not go down that rabbit hole. But what I do want to say is that it's completely out of touch with what most Americans are feeling. You know, Joe Biden is out here talking about Bidenomics, and his disconnect is trying to make sure that Bidenomics meets people in their pockets. Wokeness, or whatever Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley and everybody else
he's talking about that. He's talking about that, but he's not doing anything, actually. Like, most Americans are not feeling that great in their pockets regardless, so it's actually a bad thing. Wait, what the fuck?
They're not worried about somebody being too woke in whatever aspect of the government it is. And so that is my point to Ron DeSantis. He's running against this fairy. He's running against an imagination. But at least Donald Trump is running on policies that I disagree with, but he's run on before, which he can articulate, help strengthen some part of the economy. So that's the difference.
Kristen, very quickly, he said that criminal charges against Donald Trump would be bad for the country, and he hopes Jack Smith doesn't bring them. Were you surprised by that answer?
I was not surprised by that answer, but I also appreciated that he snuck in toward the end. It's time for us to look forward, not back. We should not be focused on what happened 4 years ago. You know Donald Trump is going to be very focused on what happened 4 years ago. That's the closest we saw to him trying to draw a contrast with the former president. I think he needs to draw some brighter lines, not attacks, but brighter contrast lines. That was the beginning of moving in that direction.
He also said that it was speculative, so he left a small lifeboat for him if he decides to leap on whatever evidence there is in the criminal charges. Thank you so much. Everyone stick around. We're going to have much more from the panel.
Isn't it funny that they're having this conversation and they're like very clearly
Governor
like,
DeSantis,
these guys
a
suck.
Republican of Florida, repeatedly, if Special Counsel Jack Smith, if he has evidence of criminality, should Trump be held accountable? His response echoes a lot of what we have been hearing from others in the Republican Party, especially those running for president. We're back in a moment from the campaign trail in Columbia, South Carolina.
God, he is just so bad. My hatred for Jake Tapper is so fucking valid. Okay, it's so incredibly valid. It was just reinforced once again. Also, here's a brief little quip from the state of Florida for all of you to understand that it's not a normal place at all. A 3-year-old driving a golf cart hit and killed a 7-year-old in Florida, police say. So, if you're wondering what is the type of shit that occurs in the wonderful, beautiful state of Florida, you know, it's this kind of shit. Florida man in training. Yeah, I mean, that Florida boy turned into a Florida man. It's like a Florida bar mitzvah. I bet especially if the 3-year-old was drunk, if he was drunk golf carting, dude, that is literally how a boy in Florida becomes a Florida man. It's a rite of passage. Anyway, let's get to some really funny shit.